Veterans in Transition is sponsored by HireVeteransFirst.com, Jelani Consulting, and Village Connector Community.
Welcome to Veterans in Transition, where we promote the veteran community. Each week we travel around the region highlighting veteran-related news, issues, and events. In a series, we'll hear the personal story of a warrior, author, and founder of Mighty Oaks Foundation. We'll hear from thankful veterans during this holiday season. And this week's Vets Talk. Veteran correspondent Jeffrey Sapp sat down with Force Recon Marine Chad Robichaux as he shares a glimpse into his life of special ops, professional mixed martial arts, and spiritual battles.
You're a former police officer, you're a former Special Forces Ops Recon guy. You're a pro mixed martial arts champion. You're an award-winning, best-selling on Amazon author. You're widely sought after as a public speaker, and you're outstanding talking on the issues of PTSD, veterans issues, and issues affecting our military. So I want to start with asking you, with all that in the backdrop, what else don't I know? I need you to tell me, who is Chad? What are you all about? Give me your story.
Well, I think my story really starts beyond the veteran issue. You know, my father was a Marine. In fact, we have 3 generations of Marines in my family because my son's a Marine as well. And so my father, like many Vietnam veterans, came home and really struggled with some of the things he dealt with in Vietnam. So I grew up in a very rough childhood with a physical abusive father, alcohol in the home, and you know, anybody that's ever grown up in a really dysfunctional home like that knows that the siblings get really close. So my brother and I, he was a year older than me, decided we were going to join the military when we got older, and it really escaped that lifestyle. And when I was 14 and he was 15, he was shot and killed, and so. Yeah, for me, he was the closest person in my life at the time, and we really had bonded together through physical abuse and all the things we had faced. And so it was really a dark time in my life. I went into really deep isolation, but I still had held on to that dream, the military being a way out for me. And I think for a lot of kids in America, it is, and it's a second chance at life. And so I'll never forget, you know, Staff Sergeant Brown, my Marine Corps recruiter. I hadn't graduated high school. I probably wasn't going to graduate high school because of my circumstance. I was living on my own at the time, and I told him my story, and he gave me a chance. He helped me to get in the Marine Corps without even a high school diploma. In fact, I got my high school diploma through a GED program at Copper Mountain College in 29 Palms, California, a year after I was a Marine. And so for me, going into the Marine Corps at 17 years old was a brand new chance at life. I always wanted to be in some type of special operations because I love the water and love to swim, but I didn't want to be a sailor.
Okay, watch it now.
I didn't want to join the Navy. I think everyone was joining to be a SEAL that time in 1993. And so, I also think my father was a Marine, and despite, you know, who he had became, and after that initial 4 years was over, I just got married, started my family. My son Hunter was born, the one who's a Marine now. He's born in 29 Palms, California, on a Marine Corps base. And and so we decided to switch to the reserves, go to college, and get a college education and come back in as a Marine Corps officer and join the dark side of the military. So.
I get to watch it now.
No, that was the plan. But you know, and while I was going to college, I was a police officer in New Orleans, and you know, if you know anything about my background, that time as a police officer in New Orleans was also a tough time and kind of another blow in my life. I was involved in a really high-profile shooting where I had shot and killed a man in front of his wife and his children, and I was went through a grand jury proceedings and ended up being cleared of it. And then 9/11, for me, like for most Americans, it changed my life. I seen those planes fly into World Trade Center buildings on the news. Being a Marine Corps reservist, being a Force Recon Marine, I knew my life was going to be different. And you were in the military at that time. You know, everyone knew our life was going to be different because, and we wanted it to be. My reserve unit wasn't like, people wasn't going there saying, "Oh my gosh, we're going to war." People were like, "Hey sir, what's up? Like, when we're going, like, let's go do this." That was the mentality, and it took a little while to get to deploy, but I got to try out for a very great opportunity to try out for a JSOC task force, and I was accepted.
You got to tell what JSOC is.
A Joint Special Operations Command Task Force. and Navy led, by the way. And yeah, so I was very, very honored to get the opportunity to serve in this capacity, and so that brought me back in full time with the military, and I wanted to deploy, and I got a chance to deploy. I did 8 deployments from 2003 to 2007, and those deployments were, I feel like I was really prepared in my job. I knew my job really well. I was older, so I felt very mature and ready to do that job. Definitely physically and mentally prepared. I don't think I was holistically prepared, knowing what I know now, because I don't think I was really spiritually prepared for that. And that's a big part of what we do now at Mighty Oaks. But that gap is an important part of my story, because without that, it was kind of the thing that I feel like was the demise for me. Right. Because I really believe that when I went to Afghanistan, I made a deliberate choice to say, hey, like, I have to do this job as a warrior, but I can't be a warrior and this kind of Christian guy, this man of morality at the same time. So I could do that when I get older. Right. And, you know, there's no place for that here. Yeah. And so I made a really deliberate choice to kind of put spirituality, put God out of my life. And Afghanistan's a evil place. And you face a place like that and see the things you're exposed to, not just gunfights, and the culture, the lifestyle there, and what had happened to women and children and people in a place like Afghanistan. And without that strong sense of spiritual strength, I believe it left a hole inside of me that I filled with like hate and rage and anger and bitterness and real cynical kind of look on life. And that actually served me really well in Afghanistan. You know, at least I thought. And everyone I worked with was that way. So if you had like a temper tantrum, everybody kind of laughed, and everyone behaved that way. And you just went and you did your job really intensely, and it worked. It worked. It seemed like it worked there. But you come home 24 hours later, and now you have to be a husband and a father, and it just didn't fit. And you know, my house became not a happy place for my family when I came home. It should have been something that they're happy to see me, but you know, within a few days of being home, I'm having, you know, these anger outbursts and just really frustrated and wanting to be in Afghanistan, because I felt like people always ask, you know, how'd you deploy that many times? Well, honestly, it was harder coming home than going there, because doing my job there is something, one, I enjoyed and I felt very good at, and it was easy. It was, you know, I do my job, I sleep for a few hours, I wake up and do it again. Coming home was complicated, especially when my wife's like this amazing mom, amazing wife. She had everything under control, and I came home and felt like I was disrupting her system. So I really felt out of place. And then me realizing the anger that I was in, behaviors that I had, I just really felt like I could fix this later, but right now I need to do this job. And over time, that anger started turning into anxiety. I'd say around my 6th deployment. Wow. And when the anxiety hit me, I had never experienced anything like that before. I never even heard of PTSD before. In fact, I heard of people going crazy. I heard of guys, hey, you know, so-and-so, he finally went crazy. But I never heard of like PTSD. I just didn't hear of it. And so when I started having these physiological symptoms, my arms would start to go numb and my cheeks would go numb. And I felt like my throat sometimes was swelling shut. And I was trying to figure out what was going on with me. And I knew in the back of my mind that it was probably stress and anxiety, but I didn't want to admit it. And I was scared to say anything, because I figured if I said something to the guys I worked with, that they would have thought I was weak and really ostracized me, and it would have been repercussions. So I just kind of pushed it down and kept trying to do my job, and was able to do so for a little while. It was later on that I started having these kind of like the manifestation of like where I felt almost out of body, and then I would forget periods of time. And then my last deployment, I had this like imminent sense of doom. Some things happened, and I knew that I was the risk factor of what I was doing had really exponentially increased, and so I knew I had like a sense of doom, and a fear. Honestly, a fear kind of settled in within me, and that amplified all these effects. And I didn't remember like a 2-week period, and during this 2-week period, I was working along with local nationals, and I knew I didn't only put myself in danger, but I put other people in danger. And so I had to say something. And when I did, I was brought home. I was put before a psychologist, and I was diagnosed with PTSD. Wow. I was removed from my job, read out of my program, which was, for me, I was dealing with two things. One, I was dealing with the fact that I felt like I was going to die at any moment because of these. I really felt like I was going to have a heart attack. These panic attacks were overwhelming. I was in a real like state of panic. So I had that going on, and the other thing going on was I just had an extreme amount of shame and guilt because I felt like I failed. And in some senses, I was told that I did, and you know, I felt like I was doing the most important job that anybody could have been doing in the war on terror. And I know there's other important jobs, but for me, it was probably important that I felt that because you know, we felt like we were doing the most important job, and I was pulled from it. It was like that was my Super Bowl.
Hi, my name is True Lester Pauling. I'm with Prince George County Commissioner for Veterans. I'm here at the Prince George County Veterans Stand Down 2017. Thank you so much, veterans and military families, for your services. We appreciate you and we support you.
Hi, my name is Eric Baldwin. I work for Kaiser Permanente, but I am also a United States Air Force reservist, and I have been for 23 years. And I'd like to thank our veterans and active duty, Guard, and Reserve that are serving now and have served.
In this week's Vets Talk, retired Army veteran Rodwell Forbes shares on a number of issues: PTSD, welcoming home our Vietnam veterans, and giving back.
I always like to start off, you know, with what I hear is so near and dear to my heart. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. Hi, my name is Sgt Major Rodwell Lincoln Forbes Jr. Currently in the military. I will transition, as she said, on June 14th, the Army's birthday, flag birthday. I will salute the flag and ride off into the sunset. I've been on 10 deployments, 6 peacekeeping missions, and 4 combat operations. And to go back to my childhood, I think back on the 26 years that I served. I started out as a devil dog in the United States Marine Corps, and I told my dad, I said, "Pop, I'm going into the Marine Corps." And he said, "Junior, let me see your hands." So I showed him my hand, and he felt it. He said, "Junior, you've never done a hard day's work in your life. There is no way that you will make it in the United States Marine Corps." And so as I was going through basic training, boot camp in San Diego, I remember the obstacles and the trials that I came up against. And when I felt like quitting, I thought about my dad. I thought about him telling me that you cannot do it. But as the Word of God says, that I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And so I pressed and endured. And then I transitioned over into the United States Army. And I had a vision that I was going to become a sergeant major. But the vision that I had was far much larger than just being a sergeant major, but to become the sergeant major of the United States Army. Because I understand that at each level that I was given the opportunity to rise up, it gave me a larger platform to serve the people. So I just stepped out of the seat from Fort George G. Meade, Maryland, as the Garrison Command Sergeant Major. 55,630 people had the opportunity to serve each and every day. I never would have imagined that I would be retiring this year until I reached out and linked up with someone from the Hospice of Chesapeake in 2014. When I first came into the seat, they reached out to me and said, "Sergeant Major, Fort Meade is so diversified with all the different services. We even have 30-plus coasties on Fort Meade." And so I said, "If it's legal, let's do it." She said, "I would like for you to lead an honor salute for the Welcome Home Vietnam Veterans Day event." Governor Hogan signed, that was the first proclamation that he signed when he came into office. And I said, "Diane, the pleasure would be all mine." So I gathered up roughly around 30, 35 servicemen and women. We had roughly around 200 Vietnam veterans and their families there. At the end of the keynote speaking, I called them to attention. We marched them around, encompassed the Vietnam veterans, and we gave them the welcome home salute. There was almost not a dry eye inside of that auditorium. But what really caught me off guard was when I marched the servicemen and women outside of the auditorium, and they were in tears. And I said, what did I miss? They said, Sergeant Major, we never knew. We never knew that the Vietnam veterans were called baby killers, that they were spit upon, that they were not welcomed back into this great United States of America. And so as I watched them in tears, that made me think that they would be the ones to say, not on my watch. Like I told you in the beginning, my desires, my goals, my plans was to become the Sergeant Major of the Army. But after being incorporated with the Vietnam veterans, the World War II veterans, the Korean War veterans, and so on and so forth, my desires, that fire on the inside of me started changing. I said, I have a voice, and I want to be the one to give the voice for the veterans, for those who have felt that they lost their voice. So out of the blue, I told them that I'm retiring out of the military. And they said, so why are you doing this? And I shared this with them. And they said, you have a bright career ahead of you. I said, I still have a bright career ahead of me, taking care of our servicemen and women. As the Army has the saying, soldier for life. So I like to say, service member for life. So after I gave that speech, and this was so near and dear what you were talking about, was that after that speech, a Vietnam veteran came up to me and said, Sergeant Major, thank you for your inspiring words that you gave. He said, but I want to tell you this. You are a fool if you do not utilize the services that we and those before us have fought so valiantly for, and for some that have given and paid the ultimate sacrifice. And I said, sir, what are you talking about? He said, I'm talking about post-traumatic stress disorder and addictions. He said, you said that you've been on 10 deployments, 6 peacekeeping, and 4 combat operations. And I more than guarantee you that you have not received the appropriate help and care that you need to make sure that you're all right. And so he said, once again, you are a fool if you do not utilize these services. It was like he hit me upside the head with a brick. So I went home that evening and told my wife, I said, sweetie, tomorrow I'm going to behavioral health. And my wife said, why now? And I shared with her the story that the gentleman told me. And my wife said, was that all it took for him to call you a fool? We've been married for 20 years, and I've been telling you this for 7 of the past years, that you have issues. What people would see outside the doors, I wouldn't see that person inside the doors. When I would come inside the home, I would shut down. I would go into my man's cave and self-medicate on Chardonnay, fighting the demons in my sleep, jumping out of bed, having the hot sweats. And so over the past year, I've been seeing a psychiatrist. And I told her that my life is an open book. And she's been slowly but steadily peeling back those layers. And my identity is arriving back again. So I'm coming out. And so each and every day I tell my wife, I'm coming back, sweetie. I'm coming back. And my wife say, I like what I'm seeing. And so that's what happened on giving birth to F3MC, Forbes Foundational Freedoms Motivational Coaching. And so, see, everywhere that I go, I will go forth and drop a dime on people. And it's literally a dime on the business card of the F3MC. And what does the dime signify? Desire, inspire, motivate, and empower.
Hi, I'm Technical Sergeant Ernest Clay Anderson, United States Air Force, retired. Served over 20 years for our service. Right now I'm here at the Veteran Stand Down here in Prince George's County. Currently I work for the utility here in PEPCO in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. To all of our service men and women, I say thank you for your service.
Tell me, how did you get in federal procurement and you know, how did you end up so successful? Tell us about your progress.
Interesting story, probably very similar to a lot of people who get involved in this thing called government contracting. I fell into it. When I was growing up, there were no college degrees for government contracting. So when I graduated from college, I applied to a bunch of different jobs, and one came back as a contracts administrator. And I remember looking at it thinking, this is not in banking, this isn't in finance, which were my degrees were finance and economics, but I went with it. And kind of the long story short is that led me on a 30-year odyssey where I worked for companies bidding on contracts. And then I thought, you know, I'd like to know what they do in the government when they're awarding contracts. So I jumped in the government in the early 1990s. And I spent 21 years in the federal government. My last pit stop was as DHS Chief Procurement Officer. So 30 years in the field of government contracting, very rewarding. I think at the highest level, the most interesting thing about government contracting, if you had to explain it to somebody, it's easy if you say, I'm a lawyer, I'm a doctor. But if you say you're in government contracting, people want to know a little bit more. And essentially it boils down to this. The government has about 5 million employees, and then they buy things. And they buy about $500 billion worth of stuff. And all that together is supposed to serve the American taxpayer. And so I was, for 30 years, involved in the buying of the $500 billion worth of things. My last stop, DHS Chief Procurement Officer, we were buying things to protect the country while adhering to all the federal policy and regulation.
So, Dr. Nayak, what is your take on veteran-owned businesses, veterans doing business with the federal government?
I think for all Americans, you would should say, we are deeply grateful for everyone who is in the military, and definitely for all veterans. There are classifications. There are veterans, then there are service-disabled veterans when it comes to contracting, and they have meaning. One of the nice things about our federal government and the contracting system is because it's taxpayer dollars that are spent giving contracts for people to do work for the government as a whole, all three branches have figured out, hey, we should probably spread this money around for the greater good of the totality of our community, one piece of which are veterans. And so what I've been involved with in terms of veterans is really kind of three things. One is at every agency I worked for, there was always a movement to hire more veterans. There are always goals to provide veteran-owned companies and service-disabled veteran-owned companies contracts. So I was always involved in that. And then finally, like probably a lot of people, you get involved in your own personal charities. I happen to enjoy the Wounded Warriors Project. I enjoy supporting that type of work.
That's all for this edition of Veterans in Transition. We ask that you like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. If you have a story, reach out to us at VetsInTransition.com. And remember, we all have a story to tell. Until next time.
I want to say thank you, first of all. Thank you for being here tonight. We appreciate our veteran here, all our veterans here at our transitional housing program. We thank you for choosing U.S. Vets as your transitional option. We appreciate your service to our country. Those of you who have not reconnected with your families, some of your families are here local, some of your families are across the country, some of your families are in other countries. So I want you to take this opportunity today to reconnect with your loved ones.
I really liked being in the military. I really, really liked it. So I had some ups and downs, and right now I'm at one of those downs, but thanks to U.S. Vets, I'm reconnecting back with the children and the grandchildren, and that's why they're here with me today. They made that possible, And so I got a lot of hope in my heart, and I'm gonna do my best to do what I need to do so I can transition into the world with my own place.
I became homeless over a medical issue. And I can tell you it is a godsend that places like this exist. I have been to many, many, many countries where your support group is your family. Well, in the last 2.5 years, I've lost 7 of my immediate family members. Any vet will tell you, when you are in a certain position, it's a brotherhood, it's a camaraderie. It's something that the average civilian will never taste. This dinner is an absolute blessing, but I'm sure we're going to try to come up with a way to pay it forward.
I think service is key to sort of having a fulfilled life, and I think organizations like U.S. Vets and other folks who are out there making a difference, particularly for those who are most vulnerable.
Most importantly, I'm thankful for getting my life back in order. You can pull up on anybody around here and have a conversation with them, and they'll stop and talk. Then they ask you if everything okay, you know? And if it's not, they'll try to fix it.
I really like my role in what we do. I like being one of the people who is instrumental in making sure that we find permanent housing for our vets and their families to, if not eliminate, but decrease the state of homelessness among our vets.
On behalf of United States Veterans Initiative Washington, D.C., we want to wish all our veterans in our community a happy holiday. Happy holiday!